Okay, we're going to get going. Tonight is July 15th, and this is the special meeting of the Radnor Township Planning Commission. We will be reviewing the revised zoning hearing board application for appeal number 2892, 115 Stratford Avenue. Is the applicant ready to proceed?
Yes, good evening. I'm George Bozeman, representing the applicant, 115 Stratford Avenue, LLC, which is the equitable owner of the property that you're all familiar with, the old Villa Stratford property at 115 Stratford Avenue. We were here, I think it may have been your May meeting. We had filed an application to the zoning hearing board in April, and we were scheduled to go before, and did go before the zoning hearing board in May, and we had shown you a plan, a mixed-use plan for the property, which I'll put up in a minute and take you through where we've been. But to fast forward, since we last saw you, we had gone to the zoning hearing in May. The neighbors who were here, that were here at the original planning commission, were opposed to our plan. And we were continued to the June meeting of the zoning hearing board, and we went to the June meeting. Between that time, we were able to reach an agreement with the neighborhood. We were advised, I think when we were here in May, we got the sense from the planning commission that you would like us to address the neighbors' concern, and the zoning hearing board told us explicitly in May, told both groups, the applicant and the neighbors, to try to reach a compromise. So we both pursued that vigorously, and we have done that. Will you be able to see things up here? Is this going to be too small, or can you zoom in? You can zoom in. Just by way of reacclimating everybody with the site. Lancaster Avenue, Route 30 is sort of in the middle of the picture, running horizontally. Stratford Avenue is coming up at a right angle from Lancaster Avenue, and the subject property is located along here between the Enterprise Car Rental Agency and the Stratford Professional Offices. The site is split zoned. It's zoned R4 residential, and a small part of it, part of which running through the existing building, is zoned commercial. So we had the split zoning to deal with and the R4 residential zoning to deal with. All of the zoning around the property is pretty much commercial, except in the back where we have the Windsor Avenue and Farm Road neighborhood, and a small piece of the bank, believe it or not, that is behind the property fronting on Lancaster, is also zoned R4 residential. But otherwise, surrounded by commercial with residential in the rear. This is an existing conditions plan of the site. Now that has to zoom the other way. So this is Stratford Avenue along here to the west, and you can see that the site has the existing building, which is non-conforming to various setbacks, and a large parking area that extends to the rear of the property. According to this plan, the impervious coverage is almost an acre of ground, impervious coverage. We learned, as we talked to the township about this plan and the neighbors, that this is sort of at the headwaters of an area with a lot of stormwater management problems. You've got an acre of impervious ground here, almost an acre, with no stormwater management controls. And the water comes off of the property, down into, through the neighborhood, and toward the Wawa. And you know the rest of that story, I think. When we were at the zoning hearing board, we went through painstaking detail to talk about the history of the area, and I'm going to put up here some of the atlas maps that we used, and we'll have to zoom in on these. And so just to orient, this is 1913, Lancaster Avenue, running through the page here, and I've highlighted on yellow Stratford Avenue and Windsor Avenue, which was originally planned to connect all the way through. The original building is here, toward the front of the site. You can see where Windsor was to connect through. And the point of these atlases at the zoning hearing board, we used that in concert with the existing conditions plan, what's surrounding the site. We were showing how this started out as a nice old mansion, but over the years, the area changed. The use of the mansion changed, and the whole area changed around it. And it was left as one of a remnant, one of the only property fronting on or on Stratford Avenue, the only property fronting on Stafford Avenue between Lancaster and Eagle Road that remains zoned residentially. And just as you page through here, here's 1919. As I page through here, you'll see the mansion, and you'll see that, all the open space that was around it. And as we go through, you'll see how the area changed. And here's 1926. By this time, you can see now the neighborhood, Windsor Avenue and Farm Road is here. You can see the heavy development coming along Lancaster Avenue. At this point, the shopping center where the farmer's market is not there, nor are the Stratford offices. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I off the... So here we are in I think this is 1931. Again, the property is here, the old mansion, Windsor Avenue, as to be extended. Again, the neighborhood is pretty much built out. You can see the density on Lancaster, but still no shopping center, no office building. This is still residential. In 1948, pretty similar. And then this was the last atlas. They stopped making them in 1961. But by this time now we have the shopping center here. We still don't yet have the offices, but you can see how much denser Lancaster Avenue has gotten, the whole neighborhood on the end, the shopping center. Our point to the zoning hearing board was that the property has changed, the area has changed. What is an appropriate use to make of this property, the last residential property on this stretch of Stratford Avenue? And our point was with the shopping center and the offices and the neighborhood in the back that we wanted to protect as best we could, what is the best transitional use that we could put here? So we abandoned the office plan. And we went, after hearing from the neighbors, we heard they wanted all residential. So we have an all residential plan, and we have still continued to feel that the townhomes that we're proposing is the better transitional use, because this property has to deal with all of the surrounding circumstances. So we feel that the buyers who will come in here are more willing to accept that kind of situation than a single-family home buyer. So that's what takes us to needing the density modification variance that we're asking for, and we have some other more minor variances, but the big relief that we're asking for is to do density modification in the R4 district. Why do we want to do density modification? Not to increase density, ironically enough, because under density modification, we're only allowed to do 5.5 units per acre. Under base R4 zoning, the minimum lot size, I believe it's 7,000 square feet, works out to a higher density. If you run that number, it turns out to 6.2 units per acre. So we're not using density modification to increase density. What density modification does for us is that by conditional use, it allows townhomes. So that's the vehicle that we're using to get this more appropriate transitional use. And density modification also allows for bonuses of impervious coverage and building coverage. On our plan, however, we're not seeking to take advantage of any of those bonuses. So we're staying with the R4 impervious and the R4 building coverage. And all we're asking is to do townhomes, we call them carriage homes, under that provision of the ordinance, because we feel it'll be a better transitional use. To show you where we were, this is the plan that you had seen when we were last here. Stratford Avenue here, again to the west, the existing building being preserved as an office, 10,000 square feet office. We would have had to provide 40 parking spaces. And then the townhomes that we were proposing, 8 townhomes in addition to that. We heard pretty loud and clear when we were last here that it was too much. The neighbors were opposed to it. It was too close to them. Some of the members of the Planning Commission had even commented that they did not believe the building was historic. We were trying to preserve it and had been trying to do so up until we reached this agreement with the neighbors. So this was what we started with. These are just different iterations of that plan. And then, after the first zoning hearing in May, we tried to go to an all-residential plan, again, trying to save the building. And this would have been 4 units in the building, and then 6 units back here for 10 units, with some separation here from the rear. I think the neighbors, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think they like this a little better than the first plan, but they did not embrace this plan. So then, where we ended up was the plan that's before the zoning hearing board, and the neighbors will explain it better than I would, but it was important for the neighbors to have this area back here preserved as open space, and they felt that the prior plans that we had were not preserving enough of it. So we agreed on these distances on this plan here, and by doing that, you can see that from our point of view as the applicant, one of the more desirable parts of the site was back here in the rear, closer to the residential, away from the commercial influences, and the site's wider back there. But when we reached agreement to push back to an acceptable distance with the neighbors, you can see we get in this pinch point, and we're up closer to the commercial. So the building has to be removed under this scenario. The building is not on any protected historic list. There's no ordinance of the township that would require it to be saved. As I said, we heard comments when we were here before, and from a commissioner at one point that they didn't think there was historic value in the building. We do know it's an old building. As the applicant's point of view, we did try to save it, but as they've continued to look at it, they do feel convinced that they're not interested in saving it anymore. They've worked hard to reach an agreement with the neighbors, and the condition of the building has just continued to decline, and it's got worse and worse. The neighbors probably have some better photos, but this is my favorite one. That kind of sums it up. That's the front door. Danger, keep out. I actually poked my head in there when I was getting ready for the first zoning hearing, and I opened up the door. It was so dark in there. I was able to get this one photo. It's totally gutted. I was afraid to go further. I wanted to take pictures of everything, but when I saw that condition and it was dark, I couldn't see where I was going. I was afraid I might fall through the floor or fall through the stairs and whatnot. And so unfortunately, the exterior has declined. It's declined even in the months that my client has had it under agreement. And the inside was gutted out by other applicants. There was a failed attempt to put a spa in here, then a failed attempt to resurrect it as a restaurant. And let's see what else I wanted to show you. Here's just, you've seen the building, but it's pretty bad. And then this is a rendering we have. These would be custom carriage homes. We think they're very attractive, and this is the kind of thing that we're doing. These would be very high-end, and we think it'll be a real benefit to the township to get this property cleaned up and get it with a development that the neighborhood will be happy with. A couple of other benefits of the density modification as opposed to R4 zoning. Under density modification, if we get the relief that we've asked for, we will be required to have restricted open space. That is not required under R4 base zoning. And we actually exceed the open space requirements under density modification. I think we're required 15%, and we're not allowed to count the required buffers. So there's a required buffer and the 15% on top of that. We exceed that pretty dramatically. So I think there's a lot of benefits to the density modification here. We'll get the attractive carriage home units, and we'll get to preserve as restricted open space the areas of the property that are not to be developed. Just trying to see if most of the other relief we need is fairly technical relief. That's the big one. We put in the application, as I mentioned, part of the property is zoned commercially. So to the extent that the township would rule that this turnaround area for the buildings in a commercial zone would need relief, we ask for relief for that. And we have another area here along the back of the bank, and there's actually a buffer required along residentially zoned properties. So we technically need relief to go closer to this piece of the property because, as I mentioned, there's a little strip of the bank that's zoned residential, but it's really a parking area, and this is their drive-through lane. So you could be having a drive-through business theoretically at all hours through here, people parking here. So it's just a lot of minor kind of dimensional relief. The key relief we need is, again, the ability to do the carriage home, townhome use here on the property, and we think that is the best use for this property. The property has been in doubt, I guess, for a long time with the township and the neighbors. It's just continued to decline in condition, and we think that this is a good opportunity to get the property back into a more acceptable condition and be a good development for the township and one that the neighbors can get behind. I know there are people who would have liked to have seen the building saved. My client tried very hard to do that and came up with a lot of plans, was very serious and earnest about doing that. But they do believe they've looked more closely now at it, and they're convinced that the building should come down, and it is their plan to take it down, whether or not the variance is granted. If the variance isn't granted, they don't think it's ideal, but they may have to pursue single-family homes here. And under that scenario, under the R4, the old building would have to come down anyway. So either way you look at it, the building's going to come down. It is unfortunate for those who would want to save the building that it was let go for so long. You know, it's just gone so long. I always say when I have historic preservation cases, the best way to preserve a building is to make sure it's being used and it remains viable. And that didn't happen here through no fault probably of anybody, but, you know, totality of circumstances occurred with changes in the economy, and for whatever reason, those other projects didn't go, and they ended up gutting the building, and they couldn't get it off the ground, and then it had sat there for all these years, and the condition has worsened and worsened. I understand there's water getting in there and all of those kinds of issues, so we hope that you can endorse this plan and endorse the relief, recommend to the zoning hearing board that we get this relief. If we do get the relief, we will be required to come back for a conditional use and a land development, so you would see the plan again in connection with those phases. That's all that I have at the moment. We do have our engineer here.
Thank you. So we can, there are no staff comments. We don't have comments from the staff because it's not a formal preliminary plan. So would you like to start with questions from the board? Would you like to hear from the public first? What would you like to do?
I have some questions.
You'd like questions? Okay, well, why don't we start?
Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine. Go ahead.
You want to go first?
I'm okay right now.
Okay. George, if you went R4 on this, would you have to bring a road in? How many houses approximately could you put in there?
We have a sketch that shows a good amount of houses. We haven't fully vetted that, we haven't engineered it, but it's not,
Do you have it with you? I'm kind of curious what it would look like.
and this is not engineered fully, it's not vetted, it's just a
Understand.
concept.
Is this the plan you showed us a couple of months ago?
It may be.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the same, I don't recall.
No, it's not.
So, this is Stratford Avenue, we're calling them private roads, they'd essentially be a driveway, and this is basically lotting it out with a minimum lot size in the zone of 7,000 square feet. It could need a waiver or two, but waivers are not like variances. You know, if you have we have a 2+ acre property here, and we're allowed to have 7,000 square feet lots. And I don't know if we need waivers, but even if we did, it's not like a variance. I think we would have to get relief. And as you can see, and even if we couldn't get this many homes, accessory structures are permitted to go 3 feet from the property line where these people live. No open space, no nothing.
That's okay, you don't have to go into it, I was just
Right.
kind of curious. So your max on that would be 11, but probably not, because you really, I believe, would have to put a road in for that number of houses. So let's go back to the one at
Right.
hand. My other question I had, you have a 6-foot wall through the center of the property. What's the reasoning on that?
Let me go back to that.
I understand the one in the front. I don't understand the one in the middle.
The idea for this was, since you'd have these 2 unit groupings with accessory decks and patios to give each privacy from the other, that was the main reason for that. And then with these units here, Unit 8 and Unit 7, you have the bank drive-through right here in the bank parking area. So trying to give protection for that, from that influence, and then just between the 2 groupings, with these being close. On these units, theirs are the back here, and these are this way, so these are the ones that are up against one another. So that was the
Okay.
thought there. And I think the 6 feet is compliant with what's allowed under the zoning.
Do you need a variance for the 6-foot wall in the front? Or a waiver?
I think we do need a variance
No.
for that.
Okay. Right, that's all. One other statement I had, just eyeballing it. You mentioned that these houses are fairly on the expensive side. I don't think you have enough extra parking, other than, I assume it's 2 cars in the garage
Right.
for guest parking. I think you only had 5 spots. Knowing how people may entertain, have guests or a party, there's absolutely no other place they could go there. You don't have a street or anything that they could park on. And it would be difficult, for example, to park in the Citizens lot, come over
Right.
the wall. So I really think you need to, if you're going to develop in this manner, have a lot of additional parking spaces, just so that the units are sellable,
Right.
because there's no place to go in the neighborhood for parking.
Yeah, of course, it's always a double-edged sword. We do meet the zoning requirement for parking, and,
Well, if you drop out a unit, you'd have a little more space to maybe put a
You
few
want to,
spots there.
you want to typically, at least the townships, want to balance the parking with not putting too much impervious on there. Not that we have the legal right to do it, but as a practical matter, you do have a bank and an office building that's probably open when people are having parties.
Yeah, but you have fences.
Yeah, but easy to walk around. I've done it.
Is there a sidewalk there along Stratford that
I
could
don't
be used?
believe there is one.
You
there
do not
presently.
believe there is one?
I don't believe there is
No.
one there, Chuck. There is not one
That
there.
would make it difficult. I think you need to look at more parking on the property if you go with this plan.
I've been to the site many times, and I parked here and walked around, and I didn't have any trouble, but I
You don't wear
understand
high
what you're
heels.
saying.
Okay, that's all I have right now.
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind. First of all, is that a driveway adjacent to the Windsor Avenue, quote, right away, if you will? Or is that actually reopening a piece of Windsor Avenue?
Our driveway in here,
Yeah.
No, this is, the way Windsor Avenue was to be laid out, it was essentially half on this property, half on the adjoining property. So this is our half of that property, which we own. It was a paper street that was not built, so each property goes to the center of that. So we're just building a driveway on our own property.
It's a shame you couldn't get an agreement with the people next door to widen that, they could have the parking she says she needs, but you follow what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand.
The next question was, we talked about, at the very beginning, you talked about the amount of impervious, didn't talk anything at all about stormwater. How would stormwater be dealt with? Would you have a better stormwater situation under this
Yeah,
scenario?
I'll let
than you
Chuck
would?
talk to that. I will say that part of our agreement with the neighbors is that we've agreed to do more stormwater than is required by code. And this is just conceptual, but I'll let Chuck Dobson talk about what's there now and what he envisions.
Thanks, George. Chuck Dobson with Inland Design. The answer to your question is simply yes, we could deal with stormwater. The previous submitted plan was actually submitted as a preliminary plan, as you recall, and there was a complete stormwater management plan. Well, it was one that wasn't accepted favorably by the commission, but we had gone through all the design relative to stormwater management, and we were able to greatly over-control the stormwater that would run off the site and ultimately down Windsor Avenue. So stormwater is not an issue for this layout or any previous layouts that we've looked at.
Basically, we'll retain most of the water on the site?
Correct. Right. We would be releasing, compared to what's leaving the site now, we would be releasing a very small percentage of that during any given storm event. So it would be significantly reduced for the 2 through 100-year storm event.
I'll take Hurricane Floyd, which I...
Haven't heard that one in a while, but yeah, that's often brought up.
I have a couple of brief questions. The asterisk under the density modification calculations says that the density calculations assume the entire site is within the R4 zoning district. So am I to infer from that this 2.134 that you're calling residential really includes the portion that's also commercial?
I think that's right.
So
Small piece here.
what are the numbers if you're only doing the residential portion?
Do we know that, Chuck?
That's one question I have.
Right.
And then
And we
it
believe
doesn't,
we would have the right to include it. It's part of the tract. And the ordinance talks about percents of tracts. So we believe we should have credit for it, and the way we've done it is proper.
in other applications we've seen with split zoning, there is a very distinct, you have a right to use it, obviously, in your calculations, but there's a very distinct calculation that indicates the portion that's commercial and the portion that's residential.
Right.
So I was just surprised not to see that on here.
Okay.
That was one question I have. The other question I have is that I don't see the existing impervious on your chart, unless I'm just not seeing it.
I can tell you what it is.
You mentioned over an acre, but I was curious about the percentage.
I said it was almost an acre. It is, according to this plan, which we entered into the zoning record, the total is 38,208 square feet. So our plan is reducing that slightly to about 35,000 square feet. So we're going from 38 down to 35, which is 3,000, about a tenth of an acre. And of course, that 38,000 has no stormwater management control. So we're reducing impervious and providing stormwater management control.
But, so I don't, so I'm correct, the chart's not on this form, you must have it on your zoning form, on your application to the zoning hearing board, I just don't see it on here, on the one we received.
We didn't put it, we're not asking for any impervious relief, so
No, it's just the numbers, so you're saying in rough numbers, for the whole 2.1 acres, you're reducing the impervious by 3,000 square feet?
well, I just can tell you, this says 38,208 is existing. And what's proposed, Chuck?
Just over 35,000. The answer to your question is yes, it is a reduction.
Of about 3,000 square feet on 2.1 acres, okay. And then the final question I have for now is, it just relates to the original application, where the stated hardship for the density modification variance relief was your desire to save the building. historic or otherwise, whatever designation people care to use for it. I'm just curious what your stated hardship for this zoning relief is.
Sure, I'm getting out my ordinance. When we were here before and when we were originally at the zoning board, that was one factor. That was not the only factor. So our position is, if you look at Chapter 280-90, the objectives of density modification, it is to encourage conservation and use of open space and new residential development. As I've described, if we do density modification here, there will be open space. None is required if we don't do density modification. Number two, to encourage land development which preserves trees and natural topography, prevents soil erosion, and promotes the best interests of the township from an aesthetic, ecological, and natural resource standpoint. So when we were at the zoning board, our case was twofold. One, we had the condition of the house, and we had the land in the back that was important to the neighborhood. So those were the factors. So what we've learned through the compromise process with the neighbors is that they value this natural area more than the building. So we'll have, we're going to explain to the zoning hearing board that we're simply preserving more natural open space, including trying to preserve this row of trees. So we're basically preserving more natural features than we were before. So with the other plan, it was a hybrid, try to save the building and try to save the, preserve the natural features. Now it's gone more toward the natural features. And then the third reason, to encourage attractive arrangements of dwellings by permitting design and layout to be closely related to the physical characteristics of the property in harmony with surrounding tracts. So the residential area that we have here, in order to be harmonious with them, they have asked for this buffer that they've been accustomed to. And as I talked before, to be harmonious with our other surroundings, we feel it's more appropriate to do townhomes, carriage homes, than single-family dwellings, which would be allowed under the base zoning. So we believe we meet the objectives of density modification, and by pivoting from the building and preserving less natural features and now preserving more, we're still fully in accord with the objectives of density modification.
The last question I have is actually for staff. Kevin, I did actually watch the two zoning hearing board meetings, so I'm familiar with how things have progressed. The agreement that the neighbors and the applicant have brokered, that's not going to come into play with regard to any application for us, right? Because it won't be enforceable?
That is a private agreement between two landowners. It's not something that the township can enforce, but depending on if the applicant is successful with relief from zoning hearing board, any conditions that would be imposed that may mimic the conditions in that agreement would be enforceable.
So with regard to us and our process, what should we be doing with that piece of information that we've heard this agreement be referenced several times? And I imagine when the public speaks, we'll hear about it as well. I want to have some context, please.
Well, I have not seen the agreement formalized, so I don't know the ins and outs. And again, that's a private agreement between two private entities that really doesn't bear a whole lot of weight in official township decisions and recommendations.
All right, does anybody else have any questions right now?
If I could
Okay.
tell you one thing that may be helpful on that point, Susan, our agreement with the neighbors is to request that the zoning hearing board impose a set of mutually agreed upon conditions. We don't know if the zoning board will do that. We hope they will, since they asked us to compromise with the neighbors. But I guess as a backstop, the neighborhood have asked that we also have that as a private agreement, which we've agreed to do. So it could be, if the zoning hearing board accepts our request, A, to approve the request that we've asked, then B, the second request is to impose those conditions. So it could be that our approval will be subject to those conditions, but we won't know until the zoning board renders its decision.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no more questions from the board right now, what I'd like to do is invite the public to come up and speak, state your name and address, and then we can have some board discussion afterward.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Fromfield Crawford. I'm a lawyer based in Westchester and been before this board in prior, not the current makeup of the board. When I say this board, I mean the Planning Commission of the township on prior occasions, and as you can see, that could be well into the distant past. Just give me a moment to introduce myself and my relation to this project. After the zoning hearing board meeting in May, which in turn was after the Planning Commission meeting in May, I received a call from representatives of the Farm Road Windsor Avenue community asking for my consultation and involvement. I think the message that had been given through both township officials and the zoning hearing board at the time of the hearing was it's important that the neighbors work with the developer to try to work out a mutually acceptable arrangement. At the time, the community residents were substantially in favor of no density modification, just do single homes. And as we talked further with Mr. Brosman and his clients, the trade-offs became more realistic and more meaningful to the community. I will say one of the very first things that I asked of the community was, you have some competing priorities here. There is a building that under this plan is proposed to be converted to either office use or to condominium use, and if that takes place, it's going to hinder the viability of a coherent land use plan for a townhome community. I say a townhome community, and I will mirror George's characterization of the product as carriage homes, not your traditional 20 or 24-foot wide townhomes. There was absolutely unanimous consent and expression of desire from my clients, and this is a large number of homeowners, not just the 3 or 4 that are most immediately affected, that this building has been deteriorated to the point where it is in the way, and it's a hazard. It's time to get on with redevelopment of this property, and we would much prefer to have the other benefits, if we can get the developer to agree to them, that we are asking for. So we went back and forth, and one of the very bottom line issues here was preserving the stand of trees, the evergreen trees, that are 105 feet from the property line. And in addition, the developer has agreed to relocate any that would be threatened. There's one that appears perhaps would be by a 120-foot setback. It's only 15 feet past the trees. They have agreed to relocate any that would be threatened, and also to plant a new row of at least 15-foot high evergreens in the slots, if you will, between the existing trees. What I would like to do is express the consent, the sentiment of this community. And again, it's not just 3 or 4 property owners. It's an entire group of homes that are a coherent neighborhood. The Windsor Farm Road area is a coherent neighborhood, and there is a very strong sentiment that the agreement that we have reached with the developer is in the interest of this community. It's in the broader public interest, particularly in the ability to further deal with enhanced stormwater management. And it's our position, and quite frankly, we were maybe shocked is too strong a word, but rather unpleasantly surprised that there would be pushback from the Board of Commissioners on the demolition of this building under circumstances where there was, the message that went out was, deal with this issue and come to terms with the developer. Everyone wants this property to be redeveloped. There have been 3 or 4 false starts. This is a viable start if this building can be demolished and a coherent land use plan promulgated. And so having spent their own time and money to engage not only myself, but also a land planner to deal with the issues, I would ask that this board respect the viability, the good faith, and the mirror of the broader public interest of a residential neighborhood, a viable residential neighborhood of Radnor Township in dealing with these issues. By way of some additional history, the building's been boarded up for probably 7 years, I believe, in that range. In 1984, there was a request that this building be recognized on the Pennsylvania Historic Commission's list. That was rejected. In the meantime, the township has taken further steps to preserve what it believes, the township as a whole, to be the most important historic resources of Radnor Township, primarily the historic district of North Wayne. But there's been no attempt to do anything either by way of regulation of this building or by way of assistance for actually preserving it. And I am particularly sensitive to this because on 2 prior occasions, representatives of the farm and winter community had requested, first in 2008 and later in 2012, that the township be proactive in taking this property, buying the property, restricting it in a way that the township commissioners would believe to be in the public interest. And if that included preserving of the building, the township would have the right to do that, and then reselling the property for development. There's been open space funds available for that purpose. It's a very viable action that can be taken if there is serious concern about a deteriorating historic resource. That was not done. In both instances, the answer that came back was, we don't have funds for that. Well, there were funds, but the funds were earmarked for other things. And so we feel that having been directed by township officials and the zoning hearing board to reach this compromise with the developer, that it's really not appropriate for this effort to be torpedoed by a desire to preserve, quote, preserve a building that's already beyond preservation. There's been some comments, I think, that, well, this Farm Road, Windsor Avenue community is just looking out for themselves and being selfish about it. Believe me, if this building had the potential to be a long-term asset, this community would be supporting that, but it's not, because they know this building. They've lived with it. They've been essentially in their backyard, boarded up, deteriorating, and basically an attractive nuisance for all these years. And it's time to move on and get this property to be a viable community asset. What the developer has proposed is not just run-of-the-mill townhouses, but a true transition from the single-family homes, and there will be spokespeople also from the neighborhood that will show you. I'm sure you know this community anyway, but it's a very attractive enclave of single-family homes. And so, in order to support going beyond single-family development for 115 Stratford Avenue, this community has set, I think, very stringent and important conditions that the developer has agreed to. And I'd like to take a moment just to summarize these. So what is the magic of 120 feet? We've gone through that basically, but the magic of the 120 feet is twofold. It gives preservation to the existing trees. It provides an area for enhanced landscaping, and you'll see that one of the conditions in item 2 and 3, that these issues are to be preserved, not just for the benefit of this community, but open space for the purpose of enhancing stormwater management. Mr. Shane will be showing you photos of some of the stormwater flooding that has taken place. I will reemphasize what Mr. Bozeman said to you. Right now, you have almost an acre uncontrolled. You have the opportunity, number one, to reduce total impervious coverage, but number two, to treat this as if it were entirely virgin meadow land and do enhanced stormwater management. This is an important point for the public interest as a whole. You can't do that if the density modification is denied. And so this is an important issue that we request the Planning Commission to consider. There is the commitment to do enhanced stormwater management in the context where the stormwater runs and floods, particularly the intersection of Banbury Way and Francis Avenue and Windsor in that area. And so that's also an important consideration. The open space will also allow enhanced landscaping. Why is that important? Because this property has been denuded of virtually all of the trees that existed other than this row of pine trees. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is an action by the township to enforce a violation of the ordinances. There were some 30 trees taken out here. That's important not only from the landscaping in and of itself to be replaced and enhanced by the developer under these conditions, but also because trees are assistants, even of themselves, of stormwater through evapotranspiration. And so the loss of these trees has aggravated the stormwater problems, not just the impervious coverage of the parking in the building, but also the loss of the trees has aggravated the stormwater flooding immediately downstream. And so the additional landscaping that can be done on this coherent piece of open space is important for that purpose as well. So the question that we also, and I'm about to wrap up here. I appreciate your time, but this is important for my clients and I think for the community as a whole. The neighbors did on their own a sketch of what they felt could be done with a single-family R4 development. And I'd like to just show you this. This has not been...
Can you turn it 90 degrees? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not very techy here. So this has not been presented to the developer because we reached agreement before the opportunity arose to present this. But it's an example of what could be done with R4 single family. What's the downside? The downside is you don't have the open space. You don't have the stormwater management enhancement that can be done with the density modification. And so weighing all of these issues, and we have, again, a very unanimous, coherent neighborhood of some 20 to 25 homes that are supportive with these conditions of the density modification. Would they find the single-family development to be acceptable? They would, of course. They came to you first and said that was their preference. But with the conditions and the concessions that the developer has made and the overall improvements to stormwater management, open space, and landscaping, this is a neighborhood that is supportive of the density modification variances that are being requested, will be supportive on Thursday to the Zoning Hearing Board as long as these conditions, including the ability to tear down this building, which we feel is really in the way of a coherent plan, would be acceptable. So if you have no questions of myself, I would also ask a couple of the residents to elaborate on their own feelings.
I just have one question. The private agreement, is that going to be recorded somewhere?
It would be documented through what's called the declaration, the Uniform Plan Community Act Declaration, and as part of our agreement, the developer is required to formulate and document these conditions in the HOA declaration, which would involve perpetual maintenance of the open space area, the landscaping therein, and the stormwater management facilities that we've just referred to. So it will be documented, it will be permanent. Another feature that they have agreed to that we insisted upon was in the event that this developer, after getting approvals, decided, well, I would rather take a profit if there was one available, move on, I will sell this to X developer, that these conditions would run with the land and be binding upon any subsequent developer that would succeed to the ownership of the property.
But, John, this is what I was asking Kevin about before. Unless these conditions are some way written into the zoning approval, if they receive it, it's in no way enforceable. The township can't force the developer to incorporate these into an HOA. That's what I understood from Kevin.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking that before.
And that's why we have made that part of our private agreement. So
But again, from a township standpoint, I appreciate it, and I'm so happy for you that you've worked at a private agreement, but what I was trying to reinforce is that from a township perspective, it's not enforceable. But I would hate to have any neighborhood ever be in a situation where they believe that the township could enforce a private agreement. So that's why I was trying to be very clear about it, that unless that document is entered into as a condition from the zoning hearing board, it's not, the township is not able to enforce that a developer go ahead and incorporate those.
Right.
So I just wanted that clear for everyone's benefit.
if I might just respond, we are asking the zoning hearing board to mirror as conditions of the variances, the very same conditions that we have agreed upon in the private agreement, so that we are hoping that the zoning hearing board, and possibly later, under conditional use, the Board of Commissioners, would incorporate the same conditions that we have in our private agreement. That's a belt and suspenders, but since we do understand the enforcement issue, that's why we have asked that the developer agree to private enforcement as well.
I have an odd question. I work for the federal government, do public buildings, and we have under the historic preservation requirements, it's possible to demolish just about any historic structure, but one of the requirements that we have at the feds is to document what was there and so forth. Is there any consideration being given to taking photographs or writing a few paragraphs about what this building was before it was demolished? I mean, not that,
Mr. Shane can address that if Mr. Shane's going to speak. He is one of my clients in this. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Do we have more public comment?
While they're walking up, could I just make it clear that it was not my client that cut the trees?
George, microphone, please.
No, we know that it was not your
Okay.
client who cut the trees.
It was not my client that cut the
Yes, we're
trees
aware.
down.
Thank you.
Sorry, George.
I know you didn't apply.
Hi, my name's John Shane. I'm a neighbor. Live on 401 Windsor Avenue. My wife and I do, and we lived in 314 Windsor Avenue. We've lived in the neighborhood for 34 years, so we're very familiar with this property. We're not the oldest living people on the street, but been there longer than most. It seems to me, listening to this, that there are three issues. One issue is what you have just been describing as the enforceability of an agreement between two private parties. Is that what you discussed, Kevin?
Correct.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two is stormwater management, which has been an issue in this neighborhood for a long time. And number three, Mr. McCone, were your questions about, well, tell us about this historic building and its current state, correct? So let me start with stormwater management. This picture was taken by Bob Simkowski and delivered to the commissioners in Radnor Township. There are 8 of these pictures which have just been sent to Ms. Rogers as part for record for you to look at. This picture was taken 3 weeks ago. Jones, sorry. No, she gave, we were trying to get these to her. I had to go home and print these pictures off because we couldn't send them by iPhone. This is what we have been complaining about in our neighborhood for this township to deal with for 30 years. We've had neighbor lose cars. We've had a house, a property that somebody bought and then took out without any approval from the township 30 buildings, which we have demonstrated that had, or 30 trees, and they were like buildings, 30 old trees that had the ability to absorb a great deal of stormwater on a regular basis. With this in mind, what was interesting to me was the number 2 issue. I don't need to show more pictures. I think that's pretty graphic, because this is at the base of our neighborhood. The idea that we are trying as a neighborhood to do something that's non-enforceable, I find, candidly, listening, a little incredulous. We've been told by every person in the township that we have to meet with builders and come to an agreement. We've been told that for 10 years. In fact, this George's client was told by township officials to call me as a leader in the community, and he came to my office and presented a very eloquent stormwater management process and a way to save the trees and a way to save the neighborhood. And I thought the man deserved merit. That was the beginning of this process in March. We got the neighborhood together, we had neighborhood meetings, the man presented, the neighborhood went back and forth, and once again, our commissioner told us that you have to come to an agreement. Work with this man. Work with the builder. Come with any builder, but work with a builder. And I'm kind of impassioned by this because we've been told this for 10 years. We were never told that with Manella's when they built their building, and we now have permanent parking on our street because nobody paid attention to our neighborhood. We have this because we're outside of the planned section of Wayne. As you know, what do we call that, Mr. McCone?
Wayne Business Overlay.
The Wayne Business Overlay District ends on this street. Our neighborhood has been orphaned by the township for a long time. And that's true. We have. And so we've had to continue dealing with parking and the idea, yes, maybe we can figure out a few more parking slots for this building, but compared to what we've lived through in our street, which is now, I have cut through people coming through, it's a real problem for our neighborhood. We have 25 houses that have probably appreciated in value by almost 100%, with people redoing every one of those houses in that neighborhood. So it's an enclave, it's a wonderful neighborhood in Wayne, and, you know, we're here to try to protect that neighborhood. And I think we have the right to do that. So as the last piece in this, the third issue was your question about the house and its relevance. So this is the entryway to what we knew as Gino's, we knew as Chef Tell's, and we knew later as the Stratford Inn. And San Francisco in between, which there are a lot of people who used to go, as you go through that keep out sign, if you remember, you turned right and you went to the bar, which used to be a dining room a long time ago. There has been no maintenance in this building since probably Chef Tell. And even Tell didn't do much maintenance, because that's not what he was about. He was about getting people in there and trying to make money, which he never did, by the way. So no one has made money at this place in a very long period of time. So that's one picture. A similar picture shows you even in more detail that all those pillars need to be replaced. Everything needs to be replaced. It's all falling down.
John, these were taken this weekend, correct?
These were taken, this last week by Mr. Erickson, the builder, who has also agreed to take anybody. All of you are invited to a tour if you want to get inside and see this. Just to prove the point that, that wallpaper isn't quite worth saving. Well, there were people who said that last week, that, there's historic, characteristics of this building that are worth saving. 7 years ago, the prior owners took out all of the plumbing. And there are holes like that have caused seepage throughout the building for 7 years. There is no way to reclaim the inside of this building. All the floors are buckled, the windows are gone. I would tell you the historical significance of that doorway is somewhat lost on me.
John, is that second floor? That's second floor, I believe.
Well, it's every floor has the same problem.
Kids have gone out.
Well, yeah, I mean, the kids, unfortunately, the kids have been in and out of that building, and they used, before the trees were torn down, ripped down, they used the backside as a kind of a campground with beer and whatever, kids will do, because it was very private back there. So I think you get the gist. So the floors have been torn up. You can see the plumbing line on the one side. And there is no wall covering, which is important. There is nothing historically inside significant. Some of the interesting characteristics when Tel built this out, there's a plywood extension which for the kitchen and kitchen staff and whatnot, and you can see after a number of years without any kind of support or maintenance, that's not a very attractive end. This is the end that abuts to, this actually looks out to Lancaster Pike. So where the bank building is, right behind the bank building and all that. So when you start thinking about all of that, and the last builder who came in said he was going to modify that with paint and retain it. And we couldn't understand because it was all pretty rotten anyway. But this is why it's not a historical building. This had nothing to do with what its origin was. So that's another look at the same thing in the extension. That's basically the tenor of the exterior, that there, again, are holes in the roof, and water's been coming in for years. So at the end of the day, not only did the Pennsylvania Historical Society turn down 30 years ago, essentially 29 years ago, any kind of certification, unfortunately this building has been let go, and it's an eyesore for the community. It's a threat to the community for kids and anybody else who might want to go in. And candidly, as neighbors, we think that we've done the right thing in working with a builder to come up with a solution that we think is best for Radnor Township and best for the neighborhood. And we've done that at the direction of the commissioners as well as other members of the community in Radnor Township. And I think we've accomplished what we set out to do. So, okay?
Thank you. Is there more public comment?
Hello. My name's Leslie Morgan. I live at 12 Farm Road. So I am a house that actually already has one side. I abut 353 West Lancaster, which is a foreclosed office building right now. And so I've been very interested because obviously more density next to me really crams me in since the office building is already there and empty. I thought tonight I would wrap up by showing you what our neighborhood looks like, again, to refresh everybody in case you haven't been there. I started this project because I talked to Bob Zenkowski, and he's having the beautification competition, and we're going to enter our entire association into the beautification because walking around the township and going through the last 5 months of this, I've started looking at segments of neighborhoods, and I haven't found two streets that have every single home in perfect condition like our street. So when I was talking to Bob about this, he said, go ahead, go enter it. And so I thought I would introduce you to our transition road first, which is Banbury. You saw it underwater about 5 minutes ago. Banbury, do I do it this way then? Okay. So it starts with, these are the kinds of homes that we have. This is the Hunts, and she has probably the prettiest garden in our area. And it goes to this house. It goes down to this house and this house, this house and this house and this house, and ends at a house that is right across from the wall. So that's the street called Banbury. It's our transition street into Windsor and Farm, okay? And why is this important? Because I think it's always important to see the kinds of houses that we have and how they're kept and the kinds of neighborhood that we, have developed.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
What?
Just
Sorry about that, Susan. So it's important to look at this, but the other thing that struck me is that we have a lot of people who care about their houses in our area. So going on, we start with Windsor. And Windsor abuts Banbury. So when you saw the flooding, and it was called Francis, it was actually right at the waterhead of Windsor. And so this house is the Johnston house, and it has the Tiffany window. That's an actual Tiffany window. Yeah, I don't know if I could be any good at this, but yes. Okay, that's a little better. Does this work? It should be on. It's on. I turned it on. Hello? Okay, so we have the Tiffany window, and that is on the one corner of Windsor and Banbury. And we go along the rest of our street, okay, into the Albanese, and we go down. This is an Oakey colonial, if you know architecture. That's an actual Oakey. And we have a lot of Tudors on the street. We have some beautiful, we have one of the most beautiful new, the Crody residence. I like to say this is the best renovation ever. They took a structure down and they actually developed a Peter Batchelor house that has a detached garage, and it actually fits the lot instead of making it too big. So they did a beautiful new construction property, and everybody keeps their gardens absolutely perfect. There isn't one house on our street. This is the John Shane, who just told you about the condition of the building. And his building here with his lovely wife Melanie is actually one of the original sister homes to the Villa Stratford. So that is what it could have looked like, but it doesn't. And it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of care, and it hasn't had any. So, and then we have the rest of Windsor. Windsor ends basically at the Williams House, which is on the entrance of the unopened paper road that goes into the Villa Stratford track. Then we have Farm, and again, this is the Donchas house, Kim Donchas, and she has some of the matching pine trees. I want to show you these, the matching white pines that go onto the villa thing. She has about 4 of them on her property. And we go down, the Brown Hartmans, she was here with her children. We have John and Melanie's old house, this beautiful brick Georgian. And we end with my house, if we can see that right there. There's my house. And I just filled in the thing with some architectural. This is the view from Lancaster on up to Farm Road. Okay? So I hope you get an idea of what our neighborhood actually looks like house by house. I'd like to pass these along to you as we're speaking so that you can get a real sense. I don't know how much you can see. There you go. So this neighborhood, on a technical basis, is we have 26 dwellings. One is on Lancaster, so it is an office building, but it's in a colonial structure. It is 9.66 acres with 26 lots. It is average lot size of 16,000 feet, and we enjoy an assessed value of $7.5 million. This neighborhood, the Farm and Windsor Roads, enjoys a $7.5 million assessed value. So we do think we shouldn't be, take it lightly. We care about our values. You can see what we do to our things. I just wanted to explain a little of my role. And it started in maybe February or March. And I was not asked to not only make a deal with Zoning Hearing Board, but the commissioner that represents our ward called me numerous times and demanded we do that. And I now hear that people are upset that we're not saving the inn. And I have to personally explain this from my perspective. In all the year and a half that we've talked about the inn with our ward commissioner, I looked through the stack of emails. Never once was I told by him that we had to save the inn or it was even important to him. I'm factually making a statement, and I stand by that. And so I'm very much taken back because I have 200 hours into this project. I'm a commercial real estate developer. It's pretty good time starting now, and I could be doing other things. I would like to do other things, but this is important to us to have harmony in our neighborhood. And nobody thought that this would be foisted on us. We think that almost it was foisted on us. We have spent probably upwards of, at the end of the day, we'll probably spend 5 figures between the engineering fees that we hired our own engineer and the lawyer to help this process through. And we're looking at that people don't want us to take down a building that nobody cared about for 8 years, and that's how we view it. There is no history to this. And I guess I'll use what the Zoning Hearing Board guy told me. If it was, somebody would have bought it over the last 8 years and done something with it. He didn't buy that, my argument, because I sort of was like, it's because it's owned by the original guy. So he didn't even agree with that, and they asked us to make a deal. And the ward commissioner continued to ask, I believe he was calling you or you were calling him, and they were calling us. And I'm sorry if anybody thinks that we made a lousy deal or not a good deal, but we're happy with this. Somebody wants to invest millions of dollars into your township. That's a pretty good thing. And I'm happy with it. I'm ready to go on, and I hope you guys are too. I mean, obviously, if you have some beautification ideas and, other ideas, we're here to listen, but we'd like to move this process along speedily. Oh, I do have one other thing about the open space, and this is important. Can we get, George, do you have the general picture that you always start with, the photo that sort of shows the whole area? Can you get that up for me? Some people have asked me why we picked that shape of the dedicated open space. Within the density modification, as you all know, there's buffers, okay, that are required. Buffers are required in any kind of subdivision, but within the density modification, there's 25-foot on either side buffers. So we had to exit them out. They're not allowed to be counted. And we came up with the shape. Fran, can you, or George, can you now bring up the current plan? Or here it is. Okay, we came up, this is good. We came up with the shape because when you measure this out of 105 minus the buffer arrangements, we're at exactly what the density modification calls for, the minimum amount of open space. So if you take 15% times 2.13, okay, you come up with, I think it's 13.9, George? 13.97 or something. This is like, I think I'm like less than 1,000 feet or less than 400 feet. That's what this equals. So there was a reason we did that. We were trying to follow also, once we were demanded to negotiate, the density modification and what we could come up with. Then how we picked the trees, because they've only been there for 35 years, is that this is the only view shed. Can you, okay. This is important. This is the only view shed. It goes all the way down to Lancaster Avenue. So you have 27,000 cars that pass it per day. You have 27,000 cars that pass by this view shed a day that is going to be closed in alternative developments. It is actually deeper than this, the park. What is the park called on the opposite side of Lancaster, go past Starbucks, where the township had to buy that piece of ground for like $1 million or so?
St. David's Community Park.
St. David's Community Park. Does anybody know the purchase price that was paid by the township? Anybody? About $1 million? So $1 million of the township money went in to purchase the St. David's Community Park. It is half the depth, and we're getting this basically as a community asset with 27, and there's a sidewalk in front of it, 27,000 cars. I know I use it, and I walk my dogs up and through there per day. We're getting to use this and look at it. And I say this about open space. Sometimes people complain about open space. I love it. But you know what? People would say, oh, we don't need this open space here. Well, wait till it's closed off, and then everybody will notice it's not there. So this is a freebie in a way. It's not free to your client, but it's free for the community to see. And I think it was an amazing job we did, an amazing job. So, Susan, so just pass this along. This is the view shed from Lancaster. This is your view shed. It goes all the way back to Stratford Office Park. And it's very clear. The only deciduous
We need you to be on the mic, please.
The only deciduous trees, the only deciduous, are those the ones that they lose their leaves, right? The only non-leaf falling trees are the pine trees. So right now it looks all green, but 6 months of the year, the only thing you're going to see is the pine trees, but you'll still see it. You'll still see clear out to Stratford Office Park. So I think that was an amazing job we did. Does anybody have any questions on this view shed? Because I'm getting like a blank look. Does nobody know where it is? It's the only open space on Lancaster.
And it's behind the bank, right?
But it's behind the bank.
It is not behind the bank. It is clear. If I'm driving my car, actually, it goes all the way back because you're connecting two pieces of ground. The bank has it all open now, and it has to, by code, stay that way. So you're using this very elegant way to further the open space and keep all the way back to the thing, and it is clear to the eyes can be, that whole section.
Is that the clear shed, that's between the bank building and you said the foreclosed office building?
So.
Is that what you're looking at?
So, does that one work? That little carry one? Hello?
Yeah, it'll work.
Hello? Does this work? Yes. Oh, okay. So, the bank is here. Here I took the sidewalk view, then the sidewalk view from Citizens, then the drive of Citizens, and it goes all the way back. It's a clear run. George, can you help me out here? I mean, you're better at presenting this stuff. It's a series of
I
pictures.
think Leslie is trying to say that, yes, it's between the bank and the foreclosed office building, so it's this piece here, right, Leslie?
Right, so you connect, so that's open, right, George?
Okay, I think we get it. I understand. Yeah.
That's the bank piece.
And then this is the open space piece, and this is the only pine trees. These all are the kind of trees that lose their leaves 6 months a year. So you really, I don't know, I mean, for visualness, in terms of the St. David's Park, which is a cost to the township, this is no cost.
Correct, Betty, so it's going to be open space, but it's not going to be public. It's going to be private property. Is that correct?
Well, this is, I mean, again, somebody was just talking about going to Stratford Office Park and parking there and going around, but I know this. I walk here every day.
It's going to be fenced, though, now with a 6-foot fence.
Well, I don't think in the last rendition, it showed it on that side. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, the entire property will be fenced with a 6-foot aluminum fence, according to the plan we have in front of us.
If that's meaningful, maybe they have some ideas. I don't know.
It's still open.
It's a visual.
Is there more public comment? Okay. I think we want to proceed with board comment, or do we have any more questions for the applicant? Kevin, I do want to clear up, I have 2 questions that came up as I was listening to public comment. Regardless of the type of development that occurs on this property, single-family, density mod, commercial development, what have you, we do have stormwater management requirements. It was mentioned during one of public comments that we would not have enhanced stormwater management, and maybe that's referenced in this private agreement, but we would have a stormwater management plan requirement regardless of the type of development that takes place, yes?
Short of utilizing the existing parking area and the existing building footprint that would not require land development, yes, any redevelopment of this parcel would require stormwater management in accordance with what the ordinances require, which is what the applicant was proposing. So, yes, stormwater management would be required for any redevelopment of this parcel.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. So, Elizabeth, do you want to start?
Initially, when we were all going through this plan a couple of months ago, I always like to try and preserve buildings, and I think that just because of what happens with redevelopment, that they can often be swallowed up, and it's nice to see things that that we don't lose sight of. However, it's also nice to see that you guys actually have worked together on this, and that it appears as though you guys have come up with a plan that you both are happy with. At the same point, it is a concern of the condition of the building, and it's hard for anybody to want to purchase a property that is in such a state, knowing what has to go into it. I think that my first and foremost concern was that we came up with something that wasn't any more of an impervious surface that's already there, because you do have a stormwater management problem down the way, whether it's coming just from the site or from multiple development. It just can't be blamed on one site necessarily, but how this site gets handled can impact how much water is going there, but not necessarily change the issue down there at the Wawa area. So I think that it would be nice to see what the final plan will end up being, but I do like the buffer area. I think that's the neighbors tend to agree that that is something that they like to see, and it allows you to keep the trees, which are there already, which is good, and there's plantings for more to come in, and I'm sure there's going to be a planting plan that has to be laid out for all of this development. I'm big on the stormwater management. That's kind of something that always comes into play, but understanding that we want to make sure that the percentage of the 2, 5, 10, whatever your storm is, probably captured, but also consideration, I know how hard it is sometimes, and I want to make sure that there's an agreement made that everybody's happy with, because I've seen it from both sides. So I want to make sure that that something's there to capture that, and that it gets distributed in the right place when there is the overflow, because stormwater management doesn't necessarily capture 100% of a storm. It captures a percentage of that up to a certain point. So I think that if the neighbors are in agreement with it, that then it's just a matter of how do we feel about some of the variances that they're asking for. And I feel that the biggest concern is that there is more units than there have been in previous plans. So, we started out with, I've got all the plans here that I have. We started with 8, and then we went down to 6, but the 6 was still had the house on it. And now we're to 11. So, this plan here is greater impervious than the last plan that went out, but it's a reduction of the house. So, I don't tend to have, at least it's less than there is there now. So I think I could be happy with this as long as the intent of preserving the open space is met and that the neighbors are happy, and, we kind of feel as though this house is a little bit past salvaging. So I'm inclined to let it move through.
I would second everything you said, actually, and what I said earlier. My one comment is, ideally, I would like to see one less unit there in this current plan. And for additional parking, you could use some sort of pervious parking method, grass pavers or something like that, that wouldn't be 100% pervious, or impervious, rather. So you might consider something like that in the temporary parking area, the guest parking. Initially, I was in favor of trying to save the house, but after seeing your photos and the condition of it, I think it's beyond saving, quite truthfully. And since the Pennsylvania Historic Commission turned it down 29 years ago, when I'm sure it was in better condition than what it is now, I see no point in trying to save the property. Maybe they could use the stone or something in your houses so you get a piece of it out of it historically, in the new houses, that is. But I'm generally in favor of what's happening here. And I think actually both the developer and the neighbors are to be congratulated for working together and, so cooperatively.
John?
I think that when I first saw the plans, I thought it was way too crowded of a site for what the developer was trying to do. But having sat through the meetings and reached this point, and I'm very happy to see that there's been a positive work between the developer and the residents, between the neighbors and the developer, that this is a good plan, especially since you're happy with it. As far as preserving the old house is concerned, I think that sometimes old things are preserved simply because they're old, and not because they actually contribute anything positive to the neighborhood. That might have been the case once upon a time, but that time's long past, and this old building is just a relic of a past that nobody seems to know or even much care about. But what it's doing right now is it's hampering the development of a nice residential development, something that will stave off the creeping commercialism that can eat through our neighborhoods. And if Radnor isn't anything, it's a wonderful series of neighborhoods, each with their own characteristics. And I think that this is going to help to preserve that and perhaps extend it. So I do agree with Kathy. I think I would like to see one less unit and open up some more open space. I'm not sure that takes away significantly from the economic viability of the project. Nonetheless, I echo the sentiments that have been expressed by the other board members, and I think that this is a good plan, good development.
I have a tendency to agree. I think that overall it's a good plan, especially since the community seems to have worked it out. As John, I guess, mentioned that he was a little taken aback by the fact that an private agreement couldn't be enforced. But again, if it's put into the zoning conditions, then the township would be in a position to enforce it. Is that correct?
We can enforce any conditions that are imposed upon the project, either through zoning hearing board or through the conditional use process.
So there you go. If you do it, a little extra stuff, then you've got something that's enforceable. As long as you keep the open space and especially the stormwater drainage, I think it's a good idea. It was a beautiful house once. Well, I was young once, so thank you.
I have a different perspective. Here's what I like about the plan. I do like that the neighbors got a significant portion of open space. And I think that when neighbors who are immediately adjacent are impacted, that always holds a high priority for me. There are a few problems with the plan, in my opinion. One is that, and I watched all the zoning board meetings because I wanted to follow and understand kind of what was going on closely. And this is, just my opinion, I do think that the very strong message was sent that the neighbors had to compromise, which is an interesting perspective to take when it's an applicant asking for variances. The spirit of compromise is always a good one to have, but I did feel that that message was sent very strongly. However, what I haven't seen compromised on here is the density. I've now seen 4 iterations of a plan, some that were formally submitted, some that were submitted and kind of immediately pulled back, sketch plans, all sorts of things. The density has not appreciably changed, and that's concerning for me. I think that all of the goals that the neighbors were seeking could be sought even further and even better with less density. And that only good things could come from an agreement between the applicant and the neighbors that has even less density than this plan. And I'm disappointed to see just as much density as more density, really, than was originally proposed to us. And that when all is said and done, with all of these variances and with all the talk of wonderful open space that's being preserved here, the impervious is decreasing by 3.75%, folks. That's not really a whole lot of impressive reduction of impervious. It's a lot of variances without a lot of reduction in impervious. So, obviously, we are going to take a vote tonight. Our memo will go to the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board will make their ruling, and then we'll either see this plan back or we'll see something different. The other things that are concerning to me about this plan are, I think, the close proximity and tightness of the units with turning circles, and when I think of other things that we consider as a board with emergency vehicle access and some things like that, I think this plan is ultimately going to be problematic. It's unfortunate to me that the bar got set, that 11 was the number of homes that could be put in here if single family was what proceeded. That number got thrown out from the very first meeting that we saw the plan, and I bristled at it at the time because the applicant made reference of it being a by right plan, even though it was pretty clear that any plan was going to need some variance to be able to build in the commercial. And as we saw tonight, just a very nice 5 or 6 single-family residential plan, somewhere between 6 and 11 is probably what could have been done in here in single family. We still would have required stormwater management. We would not have had the appreciable open space here. So, and I appreciate Ms. Morgan's pointing out, and I will notice that Lancaster Avenue view shed when I drive over to the farmers market. I will make note of it. So thank you for pointing that out. So I think that there's potentially more work to be done here depending on the outcome of Thursday's meeting. But the other piece of this that's problematic to me, that really the most problematic to me, it's twofold. I don't have strong feelings about the mansion per se. It was, when it was first presented to us as the hardship a few months ago, I immediately made some notes that I wanted, if that was going to be the basis for hardship, I wanted it codified somewhere that building better get saved then. So now the plan, because my concern was that it is in such rough shape that any applicant could come in and say, yes, we want to do X, Y, and Z. This is not to pick on this applicant. It could have been any applicant. Say, yes, we want X, Y, and Z because we're going to save the building, get their approval, and then come back and say, oh, sorry, the building is in horrible shape. We just didn't understand, which would be a very reasonable, series of events that could occur, particularly seeing some of the pictures tonight. I don't personally have a strong attachment to the building. but I understand that there is some attachment to this building. We'll see how that plays out. But the biggest thing that I'm concerned about is the precedent that we're setting in allowing for a variance of density modification on land that's less than 5 acres. And the justification for that in this particular situation could have been in order to save a significant building. Maybe that would be the justification. But short of that, I am concerned that we will now have a slew of applicants coming in and trying to use these same percentages. Well, we're saving 15% of open space of our acres, so can I put in 3 homes? You know, I mean, that type of thing is of concern to me. Again, that will be, you know, many of these things will kind of play out Thursday evening at the zoning hearing board meeting, and then we will be presented with whatever plan we are presented, and there'll be a conditional use hearing, assuming they get their variance. And I will raise probably many of these same concerns. I think on balance, an ideal plan would be something that has the building, if it can be saved, and a stand of 4 units. I think 8 probably would have been the number I was looking for. Other people mentioned taking off 1. I don't see it. It still strikes me as a very dense plan. And I think that the neighbors, if they're happy with this plan, they would be thrilled with a plan that has 3 fewer units and has that much more open space and that much more opportunity for stormwater management and all of the things that you very rightly are seeking and that I appreciate you've worked so hard to achieve. I find it hard to believe any of you would be disappointed if there were even fewer homes on this particular site, as long as those other things were maintained. I don't know if there's more to discuss, if we want to just take a vote and then do our memo.
Sorry, just arrived late. Could you take one more public comment?
Jim, you know, we did have public comment earlier, but you're welcome to come up and make a quick comment. That's fine. We changed up the order a little bit tonight.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I just noticed on the website the timing of the meeting. I'm not within 1,000 feet of the spot, but I have been using and traversing the zone for 45 years. And I, number one, would like to emphasize preservation. I noticed there's comments, with all respect, it was a nice building, is often the case. This has a lot of endearment to a lot of people. They haven't been here in great numbers, but it was disappointing to the public to see that it was some kind of a bargaining chip as far as the building. I'm not sure how it worked. But I found personally, and I'll just make these my personal observations, that the office residential was fascinating. This was unique. You don't see a lot of it. And the district is unique. You have a bank, you have a used car lot, and then you have a very picturesque office complex. Well, an office residential complex was great. I don't know where the road and the turn occurred, turn in the road occurred. And finally, I'd like to say that, bearing this in mind, I intend to pursue this angle at the zoning hearing board. I hope other people in the township will. And there's one more issue. If you notice the old Farm Road extension, it was never an extension, that was Farm Road. Do I have the name right?
Windsor Road?
Yeah.
Road is Windsor.
Windsor did indeed go through. And I've noticed that the parties, and in previous zoning board hearings, the parties have never been willing to say who has title to it. I think that the easement, at least, is still valid.
It is not. It has been vacated by document.
So if it's owned by the respective parties on either side, or all by 125 Stratford, I've been putting in requests to the commissioners and whoever will listen that a walking path, a very simple path from the current farm over to the entrance of the shopping center actually completes a jogging, stroller, and moms with kids path all the way from St. David's to Spread Eagle, I don't know if that's still the name, that we've been trying to have for 2-3 decades. If you trace it out on your maps at home, you'll see that there would finally be a path that didn't involve those sidewalks on Lancaster Pike. It doesn't really pertain. I wanted to say it as soon as possible. And could the commission look at that idea, if you ever have a spare moment? A simple walking path from farm, continuing farm under what is obviously unused but clearly visible row of oak trees up to the shopping center. And of course, I'd make that plea to the owners, prospective owners, at some appropriate time.
Thank you. Okay, so does someone want to make a motion one way or the other?
I'll make a motion that, is approve the right thing on this? That we recommend approval of a plan similar to this. Maybe I should word that, I recommend that we're in favor of a plan similar to this for zoning, to take a look at it. Yes, that's correct. Which includes removal of the house.
I think technically, because this is the plan that's been presented to us, the vote needs to be that we either recommend approval or not.
Okay.
Of the plan as presented, and then it will be for the zoning hearing board to parse what they want to do.
I don't really want to recommend the plan is approved, because I'd like to see some changes, and I don't want to be tied into this recommendation when it comes back to planning and have us bite us in the butt. I would recommend a plan similar to this for the zoning board to look at. I don't want to say I recommend this specific one with the removal of the house.
Kevin, do you have a suggestion on the wording that Kathy's searching for here?
Well, I think it sounds like the planning commission may be supportive of the redevelopment of the site.
In this
That does not
manner?
include the preservation of the existing structure, if that is
Yeah,
what
that
you're-
works too.
Do you recommend the variances be granted?
Yes.
Do we want to talk anything about stormwater as a piece of that, or is that just foregone?
I
You know
don't-
what, we're
the
going to hit
zoning
all
doesn't
that
look
in
at
plan.
that.
Yeah, we're going to hit all of that in the development process if it comes back to us as conditional use. So then Kathy, how about we say this, that Kathy's making a motion that that the planning commission supports redevelopment of the site without the existing structure,
Without saving the existing
without saving the existing structure, and that you would support the density modification variance.
Variance,
as
yes.
The density modification variance, which is really the big variance that they're
Yeah.
going for. Okay. So,
Could you include all of our variances?
We got to work on that one.
Mr. Brooks,
You got the big one.
all right, Sue, are you good on the, hang on, I just want to make sure Sue has the wording correctly. Motion by Kathy that the planning commission supports redevelopment of the site without saving the existing structure, and that we would support the density modification variance.
So that gives us a little bit of play with parking and a number of structures and
Right.
the ability to take a look at a final layout and make sure it's okay.
Right.
Your recommendation could include those things that you are concerned about, just for your clarification.
Okay.
All right, so then we can say. However we want,
Would like to see possible reduction of a unit or two,
however we
and
would
additional guest parking.
like to see a reduction in density,
With additional guest parking.
and additional guest parking.
Right.
Okay.
We also want to include the thing, he mentioned when relief is part of it is zone commercial, part of it's, with respect to just zoning
Yeah, I'm
changes.
fine with
You know,
that.
Doug, I'll just show you, having watched the zoning hearing board meeting, this particular variance is really the big one. This is the one.
I would like you to weigh in, the plan lists them, you don't have to do it specifically, but as far as our client is concerned, they're all important, and if we don't get all of them, the project could be jeopardized.
All right, well then, let's talk about, I guess we're going to, so we can make that motion, so that motion's on the table, it has not yet been seconded in its form, and we can either amend it or we can make a secondary motion, so let's just look at these for a minute.
Okay.
Variance 1 is the one that we've basically just covered in the motion that's been stated. The variance 2 is to allow the residential use and related improvements in the commercial district.
Yep.
Variance 3 allows the paved vehicle turnaround and the 6-foot-high fence or wall in the required buffer from the adjoining bank. a portion of
Could
which
you
is...
show where the paved vehicle turnaround is on that plan? Out there, okay.
Here's the wall.
Okay. The fourth one is the variances that would allow multifamily townhomes to be built in the R4.
Yes.
Number 5 would be a variance from requiring plans to be forwarded to the Planning Commission, which I'm thinking that since you came tonight, George, you'll be withdrawing that particular variance?
Correct.
Okay. And then variance 6 is a variance from the code that would allow a 6-foot-high wall to be in the front yard setback. Now, that would be the setback that's on Stratford Avenue, right? That's the front yard setback to which you're referring?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then any other relief necessary.
I would, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but no, I'm not giving number 7. So,
Need a
1 through 4 and
recommendation on
6.
that. That's just for when a notice thing, if the zoning
I know,
board
I
were to raise
understand that.
another issue, so
I realize that.
I understand that one.
So then, after the sentence, however, we would like to see a reduction in density and additional visitor parking provided.
You do see that there is some on the side of the
Kathy was asking, again, I think, okay.
I
just wanna make
didn't
sure
think
I
that
saw
was enough for 11 units.
Kathy, how about if we just continue the motion to say, the Planning Commission is also in support. Kevin, are these going to be submitted as numbered variances? Can we just number the variances, or do we have to be specific on them
I
actually?
think if you reference those as they are listed numerically
Okay.
on the plan, that would be sufficient.
All right, so then we can also continue that motion, Sue, as the the Planning Commission also supports variances 2, 3, 4, and 6.
In addition to 1.
In addition to 1. Well, we referenced that in Kathy's original motion. Does that sound good, Kevin? Okay. So, do we have a second on that? And I can read it back to everyone if you want. All right, so motion by Kathy that the Planning Commission supports redevelopment of the site without saving the existing structure and supports the density modification variance. However, the Planning Commission would like to see a reduction in density of units, Sue, let's add that, of units, and additional visitor parking provided. In addition, the Planning Commission supports variances 2, 3, 4, and 6, as stated on the plan. Thank you. Do we have a second from John?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 1? Okay, it passes. Is there any further public comment?
Hi, Jim Schneller. I was just wondering, it's a request has been made before. If you have a set number of variances, could you print them out so we could go through them as you do?
You know, I apologize, Jim, they were not provided to us in list format tonight. They are only as available on our plan, which is the reason I stated them as we went through them tonight.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It would be a little bit more assistive.
They're available online.
Yeah, they usually list them.
And I understand there's a new kiosk here where you could probably print out the zoning hearing board meeting for Thursday night where those variances will be listed. Okay?
Thanks.
All righty. Do we have any further business? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.